All right, let's look at the last section of chapter 15. If you have my notes, we are skipping respiratory volumes and capacities and moving on to the control of breathing. All right, so let's move on to here. All right, so breathing is an involuntary act, but it's odd because those respiratory muscles are skeletal muscles, so they're still under voluntary control. So it's one of those involuntary acts that we can take over and have voluntary control of for a little while until we stop thinking about it. So let's look at the parts of our brain that are going to control this involuntary action. All right, so the first is found in the medulla oblongata, and this is known as the medullary respiratory center. And there's two parts in here. One is the dorsal respiratory group, which we see there. That dorsal respiratory group is going to control the basic rhythm of respiration. It's going to send a signal to our external intercostal muscles and diaphragm to contract anywhere from 12 to 15 times a minute. All right? So, the other group is called the ventral respiratory group, and this only gets interacted when we need to make deeper breaths. So that's going to increase the depth of our breathing. It's going to be quiet during normal breathing. Next is in the pons is a pontine respiratory group, and what that does is going to increase our respiratory rate. So once again, it's going to be quiet during normal times, but if you start going for a jog, that's going to be activated then. All right, let's look at other factors affecting breathing. All right, so the first is that we have chemosensitive areas in our medulla oblongata. So showing here, those areas are going to sense carbon dioxide levels and hydrogen ion concentrations in the blood. So if our carbon dioxide levels go up, carbon dioxide is going to mix with water and it's going to produce carbonic acid in our blood. And if our carbonic acid levels go up in our blood, well, then the hydrogen ion concentration goes up in our blood. So carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentrations are correlated with each other. All right? So if one goes up, the other is going to go up. All right? So if hydrogen ion concentrations go up, then that means our blood acidity is increasing. And so in order to get our blood acidity down, we're going to increase our respiratory rate. Now, if our blood is getting too basic, we're going to slow down our respiratory rate to keep more carbon dioxide in and keeping more acids in us then. All right? So next is that we have peripheral chemoreceptors. And so you can see some of these here. All right, so these are in certain arteries, and they're going to sense oxygen levels in our blood. So our oxygen levels are going low, they're going to send a signal, and we're going to increase our respiratory rate. All right? One of the things that can influence both of those, carbon dioxide levels and oxygen, is just exercise. If we start exercising, carbon dioxide levels go up, oxygen levels go down, so if you notice, your breathing rate will go up. All right? Next is the inflation reflex, which they're calling the Herring-Brewer reflex here. So this is going to regulate our depth of breathing. All right? So our lungs are, a lot of these alveolar sacs, which are made of simple squamous epithelium. All right? So that's a very thin cell. So we don't want to put too much air in our lungs because that could actually damage those alveoli. So this inflation reflex actually prevents the overinflation of the lungs, which could damage those alveoli. Next are emotions. So, either whether the cortex or, pain or something like this, emotions can increase our respiratory rate. So fear or pain, some people when they get angry will hold their breath. All right. Well, we can also have cortical control here by voluntarily holding our breath. So this will occur until our blood concentrations of carbon dioxide increase, and then we're going to feel that urge to have to breathe there. All right? So we can't do that forever. Lastly, the last thing I'm going to mention is hyperventilation. And this is an increase in respiratory rate with abnormally large breaths. And so what happens in hyperventilation is by having your increase in respiratory rate with these large breaths, you're going to get rid of a lot of carbon dioxide out of your body. Well, that's going to increase the alkalinity or the basicity of our blood. And what happens there is that our cerebral arterioles are going to constrict because of that. And by constricting, that's going to reduce the blood flow to our brain. And if we have less oxygen to our brain, one of the things our brain does is it causes us to faint. All right? So that's what can happen with hyperventilation. In the old days, they used to give people some paper bags to breathe back that carbon dioxide into themselves, right? But the problem with that is you don't know how much carbon dioxide that you're going to re-inhale, and you could actually inhale more carbon dioxide than what you actually need, okay? So the best way is just to calm the person down. And if the person won't calm down, well, this will all resolve itself when the person faints. If you have my notes as well, we are not going to do G, those non-respiratory movements either.